Throughout the entire event, we've been having a representation from the leadership of our sponsoring NIH institutes and centers, and I'm delighted to turn the microphone over to Dr. Bruce Cuthbert, who is the acting director for the National Institute of Mental Health. Dr. Cuthbert.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome from NIMH to this conference. I wish that I could be catching more of it, but I've heard many good things about the proceedings. I just want to make a few brief remarks about the NIMH portfolio and interest in this area, and then I will turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Briggs. So we support a fair amount of research on cannabinoids. Over the last several years, our portfolio has been shrinking. Over the period of 2008 to 15, we had about 55 grants. That was down to 34 from 2010 to 15, and we only have about 10 active grants right now. That does not indicate any lack of interest, but simply the fact, as you know, that at NIH we accept mostly what applications come in and receive fundable scores. So we are certainly open and amenable to seeing more research in this area. The majority of our studies at NIMH are funded in our basic science division, in our translational research division. We're interested in things like mechanisms of brain cannabinoid signaling that are relevant to our major disorders and the clinical risks associated with cannabinoid use. We also have a strong focus on neurodevelopment, consistent obviously with the risk factors for clinical disorders. So for instance, just to mention 3 R01s in the basic risk area, Subroto Gose at UT Southwestern has a project on synaptic plasticity in adolescent cannabis users and its relevance to schizophrenia. Beng Chun Ho from the University of Iowa also is studying adolescent cannabis use and brain network connectivity. And Kai Seng at the Rosalind Franklin Medical School in Chicago is looking at the modulation of adolescent maturation frontal cortex by cannabinoids. Also, Ramina Mizrahi has a project on imaging neuroinflammation related to cannabis use. So these are typical of the kinds of basic and early clinical projects that we are looking at. And I think you've also heard in the prior session this morning from 2 of our researchers who have been looking at more proximal areas to translation, Dr. Cecilia Hillard from the Medical College of Wisconsin and Christine Rabenak, both funded by NIMH and introduced by Dr. Susan Borgia, who is one of the mainstays of our post-traumatic psychopathology program. So I'd just like to outline just a couple areas in which our areas of interest intersect with cannabis use. One is an example from a project that we call BSNP, a large study of psychotic psychopathology across the schizophrenia to bipolar spectrum. The investigators recorded a large number of cognitive and sensory motor reactivity measures, responses to tones and lights and so forth, and looked at those measures as they clumped across that psychotic spectrum independent of formal diagnosis, schizophrenia, bipolar, what have you. They found 2 major clusters that were related to very severe cognitive impairment and severe alterations in various ways in sensory motor reactivity. But a third group was composed of people who looked fairly normal, both in cognitive functioning and on their sensory motor reactions. And these included people diagnosed with all 3 disorders of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and schizoaffective disorder. And in this group, the investigators reported to us informally that they found a much higher prevalence than in the other groups of cannabis use as a risk factor. So this seems to substantiate the well-known doubling of risk for psychotic disorder due to cannabis use in adolescents, and B, the fact that this actually may be a slightly different type of psychopathology, biologically speaking, than our more classical conceptions of these disorders. So that's certainly something that we want to follow up on. The other thing I want to mention is that, again, with Drs. Hillard and Rabenak, the issue of clinical trials comes up and our interest in these things, and clearly that is a topic of increasing importance. As Dr. Hillard, or Dr. Rabenak, implied in her talks, NIMH is very strongly adopting an experimental medicine approach to our early clinical trials. We are actively seeking clinical trials in all areas of the science, and that would certainly include trials in this area with these agents. However, we are moving radically away from the traditional model that you give somebody a drug and then see if something good happens. And if it doesn't happen, you don't really know why. Rather, what we are saying is that we want to see some evidence that the drug in question, or whatever treatment it may be, has engaged the intended target through means of a PET ligand, neuroimaging, and other factors. We'd like to see some evidence that once target engagement was achieved, that actually did something in brain or behavior, changes in laboratory responses to stressful pictures, changes in brain waves, what have you, and that finally that those sorts of changes can be linked to actual clinical outcomes. So we establish a chain of causation for the study, and among other things, if we see a failed outcome, we have a better idea of how to understand the failure and move forward in a productive way. So that's all I really want to say, because we just wanted to give you some brief summaries. You can follow up with our program officers if you have interest in these areas, and we would welcome your contacting us. Thank you, and now I will turn it over to Dr. Briggs.
Thank you. So I want to join the voice of all the sponsors here by expressing the appreciation of NCCIH and being part of this really important dialogue going on here today. The power of trying to bring both new clinical methods and new fundamental biological methods to this interesting pathway, I think is very apparent as I walked around the poster session today. We have a special and slightly different mission than the other institutes. We are not disease area focused. We are focused on real-world health practices that are going on outside mainstream medicine, but widely incorporated into people's personal choices for their own health. And clearly, the use of cannabinoids is something that's happening. And how to bring rigorous science to it has been a puzzle and a challenge for the NIH. So we're very pleased to be part of the important dialogue going on here today in thinking about this issue. An area of particular interest for us is pain. And I gather that there were some excellent presentations today on the potential of the cannabinoid pathway in pain. The main reason people turn to complementary and integrative health practices is actually for the management of chronic pain. And so we've been delighted to partner with NIDA and the other institutes that are part of the NIH Pain Consortium and the Interagency Pain Consortium in thinking about how to improve our available tools for the management of pain. Now, much of our portfolio has in fact focused on the use of mind and body approaches, relaxation techniques, breathing techniques, yoga, meditation, manual therapies for the management of pain. But when you see the science coming out around the use of these therapies, you get a stronger and stronger sense of the complexity of neural circuitry in the modulation of pain, and certainly that is part of what the public use of cannabinoids in pain management may be telling us, that there's a signal there that is worth rigorous science. So we're part of the National Pain Strategy published earlier this week, and eager to learn ideas that will come out of the conversations happening here today and yesterday. One area that is important to us is also an area that we have begun to study, which is the safety of cannabinoid drug interactions. And a network of, a team of centers have been charged by us and established to study, bring increasing rigor to the study of the the pharmacokinetic interactions that may be activated by the cannabinoid pathway. This is one of 5 or 6 pathways that will be studied by this network, but this is an area of special interest for us. So thank you for the science you're doing and for being part of this interesting symposium.